Welcome to Maritime Software Hub, the People Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to sit down and talk to Gupreet Singh, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at RightShip. He's had a really interesting background, starting in the army in Singapore in his teens, progressing into working into companies such as Maersk and Shell, and then later on, and ultimately ending up being the Chief Commercial Officer at RightShip. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for tuning in again. And if you have any questions or would like to reach out to us, drop me a note on LinkedIn or message podcast@cordellbeaumont.com. Thank you. Hi, Gurpreet. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Callum. Thanks for having me here. Very happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to speak with you and showcase your profile, your background, and also RightShip solutions to our listeners and things. So great to have you on. So as a quick intro, you're obviously the Chief Commercial Officer at RightShip. You've got a really fascinating background in the Army initially, and then stemming across different maritime companies, obviously working at Shell as well. So perhaps you could do a bit of a better job of introducing yourself and telling us a bit about the early stage of your career and go from there. That's okay.
Sounds good. So let's start with my early stage of my career indeed. So I'm Singaporean. I'm born in Singapore and I've spent most of my life out here. And as such, I enrolled into the National Service of the Singapore Army at the age of 18, which is when we spent 2.5 years enrolling ourselves through various tasks, leadership roles in the Army. And it was my first foray in taking a leadership role very early in my then career, in my life actually.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Upon studying with my bachelor in mechanical engineering in school, I then moved into Maersk, where I spent 7 years of my early career life. And that was a very interesting 7 years where I moved via the management trainee program into full-time roles, dealing with pricing, operations, and a sales role, which was my last role in Maersk. And that was the role that really interested me more into the commercial world. Following that, I did my MBA for a year in France with INSEAD, which was a very enriching year as I worked with and I collaborated with a diverse set of classmates from different industries and different geographies. And I learned a lot through that 1 year. And then I moved back to Singapore and I joined Shell with the Shipping and Maritime organization. At that point of time, I held the role of Business Development Manager, working specifically on LNG as a maritime fuel.
Yes.
Throughout my 6-7 years in Shell, I also moved a couple of roles. One of the roles that I often reflect on was as a product manager for a digital venture that we had spun out in Shell. Very great learning experience. First time getting involved in a digital space full time. Great learning opportunity, and following those 7 years of meeting wonderful colleagues and learning a lot more from the energy side of shipping, if you will. I then moved into RightShip, which is where I am now for coming to 2 years as the Chief Commercial Officer. And as Chief Commercial Officer, my duties are largely around leading and executing the global commercial strategy plan, which is largely around how we orientate ourselves around customers, how we serve the market better, and how we learn from what the market is telling us in how we position our products in the correct way.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And I think I've seen a lot of, read a lot about RightShip's kind of how you're really trying to push the ESG, that's your main focus, and towards zero harm for the welfare of the crew and mariners. So yeah, really interesting to dive into that in a little moment. But just to go back a moment, so you mentioned about doing your sort of national service in the Army, and we used to have that in the UK years ago. My granddad refers to it very regularly, but we don't have to do it anymore. And I'd just love to hear your, I don't know, I guess a bit of your take on what the experience was like for you in the Army at that early age. Was it quite daunting at the time, or did you relish it? You find it really exciting?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. When I ask my peers and I ask the upcoming generation about it, there's always mixed reviews. Some people regard it as a chore. Some people are curious about it, and of course there's some people who are slightly daunted about it. For me, it was something that I was really curious about. I personally have enjoyed my school years where core curricular activities come in, where I could step out of the classroom and get a little bit outdoors. So this is an opportunity to actually really get outdoors and spend time with the with others of the similar age, during those 2.5 years. To me, it was quite surprising. Initially, I was a little bit worried about whether I could meet the physical standards that typically happen in a national service capacity. However, I managed to overcome that and also build some leadership competencies very early on in my career. So it started off with a little bit of concern about fitness, and it started off, and then it led to more of a curiosity, building into leadership competencies and working well with others that come from very different and diverse backgrounds. I think that was the huge learning opportunity for me in the national service.
Yeah, and I guess a little bit of discipline as well there at that age. I think I probably could have done with a little bit of that. But no, it's really excellent thing to do. And I know a lot of our kind of Greek friends and clients in Greece and other regions across Europe still do it as well. So it's I think it's an excellent thing. Good. And then fast forward a few years, you mentioned you were kind of one of the digital ventures leads at Shell, which sounds like a really interesting sort of project. What solution were you working on? What was their kind of offering at the time while you were there?
Yeah. So this was an offering such that we were working with the Shell's downstream retail customers and largely around looking at supply chain optimization. So it was more of the road transport of the industry versus the maritime transport of the industry. So it's my chance to step out of maritime, pick up some learnings from what's happening beyond in the logistics, the road transportation space, before going back into the maritime sector as my later on career roles would have evidenced. Now, the solution that we were working on was a software as a service solution where we worked with our customers to help them optimize how they do deliveries. As you would imagine, in Shell, there's a whole host of customers. There's a bunch of course, individual retail drivers like you and I if you are on the road. But there's also some customers who work on a fleet basis. So they own a host of vans or motorbikes or delivery vehicles.
Yep.
And the solution I was then working on was in collaboration with another startup in the industry, and how we were able to help our customers optimize their trips more efficiently. And of course, the proposition there becomes for Shell to really expand on its proposition, not just on the fuel side, but also looking into how to help customers of Shell deliver their operations in a more efficient and optimized manner.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. All right, fantastic. And you kind of said that kind of maybe kind of sparked your interest on the digital side of I guess the SaaS sort of arena and that area. And I mean, in terms of shipping and maritime, did you find there's obviously the last 5 to 10 years or so, we've seen a real boom and push and investment in different solutions across the world and all different variations. I mean, what do you find kind of most exciting about, I guess, the digitalization of shipping and how in different ways it can help mariners or ship owners or charterers? Anything in particular that stands out for you as particularly exciting?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very rich question, Callum, and I think what comes out to me is really why I even joined the shipping industry in the first place. It's an industry it's extremely global and extremely complex with many parties with different parts of the value chain. Now, when we think about digitalization and shipping, to me, the really appealing piece is how we can start to democratize the insights that happen across the different parts of the value chain, how we can bring different parties together. And if there wasn't digitalization, adversely, it's going to be a much more inefficient industry in the sense that we would have very parties that are operating in silos and they will continue to operate in silos. So to me, I think the biggest interest point for shipping and digitalization is how various parties can work together on very real world use cases.
Yeah.
And one of them that I could highlight is with regards to safety. Mm-hmm. So if one imagines a world of which every party is trying to work towards enhancing safety in their predefined manner, you would have a very chaotic world. And in a world where we think about the use cases of safety and how you can democratize that across the whole value chain, such that when a port looks at safety, or a charterer, a cargo owner thinks about safety, or a ship owner, manager, or a crew member, a seafarer thinks about safety, the opportunity becomes a lot more transparent and a lot more even across the value chain.
Okay.
Now, I'm also super aware that when you look at the different parts of the shipping industry, when you look at the tanker side, when you look at the dry bulk side, there's differing standards. And I think digitalization has its opportunity to grow very much in this particular space.
Yeah.
And that's what we in RightShip are always busy with, to help leverage on the insights that you get via the digital solutions that we provide. And this would not be possible if there wasn't digitalization in action.
Yes. And then I guess the challenge is then taking those insights and I guess implementing them and communicating them with the crew and with the captains and I guess showcasing it in the best way to be as safe as possible. So do you find that a particular challenge, kind of the uptake of the insights that you're sharing across the sort of the marine space in general, or is it it's becoming more and more taken on board regularly, would you say?
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. And I think, there's really a spectrum of maturity here. There are for example, the customers or prospects in the market out there that are very mature amongst their digital journey, if you will. And for them, the objective is really about how to get data, how to get insights into their platforms. So for these particular types of personas, the proposition would have to be tweaked such that we leverage on features such as open APIs to get the insights and the data to flow into their particular platforms that they've built in-house.
Okay.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, you see some of the players in the market that are still in their infancy of this journey, and they rely on platforms to give them these insights. Now, when we think about shipping and we think about the players and the attitudes in the past, there's always been a little bit of silo thinking. I will create my own platform and no one else, and then another party will create their own platform and not work with anyone else.
Yes.
I think the opportunity with digitalization or with this whole platform play is how partnerships can come live. And partnerships will help various parties then access the insights that they need to really up their game with regards to safety using that similar use case. So we think about the different parts of the spectrum. There's the more mature players in the industry that are able to leverage on more technology-driven features. And then on the other side, there are those who rely on partnerships. And that's something that we're very welcome to. We're very welcome to work with partners out there who are like-minded, who really want to drive this notion on zero harm in the industry, such that we can up the game. And we also have partnerships with existing players out there to really drive this similar agenda.
Briefly interrupt this episode to give you a quick overview of our core business, which is Cordell Beaumont. We're the company that powers the podcast. For those of you that don't know of us, haven't heard of us, we are a digital search agency, and we focus primarily on the maritime, trade and supply chain space. So what does digital search mean? Well, essentially, we are a recruitment agency that really partners on a more strategic way with our clients. We help them hire mainly commercial professionals, so there could be sales, marketing, product management type of individuals, leadership, and also more techie sort of software development roles, that type of thing, in a slightly more mid to senior function. So often our clients are people that perhaps don't want everyone to know that they're hiring. So a lot of the hiring we do is a little bit more behind closed doors. So if you're looking for perhaps for a strategic recruiting partner that knows the maritime market very well, is regularly in touch with individuals and professionals within the digital shipping space, then we'd love to hear from you and help you either from a hiring angle, where we could help you with kind of either any current hiring plans or maybe down the lines to help with kind of future succession planning, or alternatively, if you are an individual working in the digital shipping space or interested in moving over to digital shipping, we'd love to hear from you. Again, we're in touch with a number of businesses all across the globe that are really exciting. Some of them are startups, some of them have been around sort of 10, 15 years scaling. Others are well established and have maybe publicly traded, got big backing from large organizations. So a real variety, and we're here to help. So please do reach out, Callum at cordellbeaumont.com, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. Thanks a lot. Yeah, no, and I saw you obviously partner with companies like C and a number of other sort of businesses across not just the more technical side of shipping, but also the commercial chartering sort of platforms, your insights, and it's obviously completely global, the reach across different market spaces and things. So I guess in a specific kind of way, it's just good to learn how RightShip is kind of helping your customers progress towards the sort of zero harm ESG sort of those sort of structures and processes that you're putting in place to help them with that. It'd be good to just dwell on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure thing. I think that's an interesting thing to dwell a bit deeper into. When one hears ESG, sometimes the response that I get is that ESG equals to environment sustainability, right? And usually I'll take that opportunity to go a bit deeper. So ESG, there's 3 parts to it, as the acronym shows. There's environment, social, and governance. So from RightShip's perspective, when we think about environment, it's a lot to do with the emissions kind of insights that would help a charterer make an informed decision about which particular trade routes to work with, or ports and terminals customer to think about which are the emission hotspots within their port geography. When we think about the S part of the ESG, there's a whole host of opportunities around crew welfare. Now we fully recognize that a healthy and happy seafarer is able to work more efficiently and is able to thus address any gaps in safety more proactively. So we see a huge opportunity to really provide additional insights and awareness around how crew welfare standards globally can be increased. As such, we work with a lot of owners and operators to really up the game when it comes to crew welfare. And increasingly, even as charterer customers ask us more and more questions with regards to what can be done in the crew welfare space. And then we move to the G in ESG. And lastly, when we think about governance, from RightShip's perspective, a lot of that relates to maritime safety. And this is the part which I was referring to earlier, where we sometimes see differing standards out there. And from a RightShip perspective, we leverage a lot on the insights that we ingest from the public domain, the insights that our customers give us, the insights that we procure as well, and we aggregate that together and we provide back to the charterer and ship owner community with those insights to really enhance the safety levels in the shipping industry.
Okay.
So by increasing the safety levels by which a charterer, for example, makes a decision about the owner that he work with, and an owner then thinks about how they can increase their safety standards, we are able to then leverage on E, S, and G to really drive home our vision, which is really about zero harm.
Okay.
So that's in a nutshell how we work with that E, S, and G positioning, also in line with the customer types that we currently work with.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And do you work closely with the different classification societies to try and embed them into their general guidelines and processes? Is that one of your kind of partnerships arms, is to do with class as well, or is that slightly separate?
In parts of it, it's similar. In parts of it, it's separate. So we are open to collaborate with classification societies. For example, we do speak quite regularly when we are coming up with our GHG standards as an instance. However, it's more along the lines of a partnership perspective that we are able to collaborate. And that's where I think we see an opportunity alongside the digital-oriented insights that we are able to provide to the industry to see how we can still work together. So I think there's more work to be done from that perspective. I think there's still a lot more that we can continue to collaborate on with various entities, not just customers, but for example, classification societies in the industry.
Very interesting. Excellent. Okay, so so the main sort of theme and each episode, we tend to talk about a different sort of role function within the kind of the maritime SaaS space. So obviously your role as Chief Commercial Officer, you've done phenomenally well to kind of rise through the ranks and get into a C-suite position. I mean, do you think, you've obviously talked a little bit about your background, but do you think there was anything kind of pivotal that really helped you kind of progress and step into that sort of senior management type of function that you can think of?
Yeah, I think when I kind of take a step back and I reflect on my career journey, there are a few, I think you call them pivotal moments in my career that have helped looking back at what I tend to bring to the table, I bring a deep curiosity in everything I do to whichever role I land on, be it a role doing pricing in Maersk, or when I was a product manager in Shell. And I think these were the two roles where I saw a lot of growth in myself personally. One from a commercial standpoint, where I was doing pricing at a very early stage in my career, and I could really look at the way I could drive P&L across various strategies that I could implement back then. And I remember at that point of time, I was focused on the East Africa business for Maersk, which was and is still a massively growing trade. And I was then tasked very early on to figure out how to optimize our P&L bottom line most effectively. Now, it was a big opportunity for me. And of course, it came with a lot of expectations. But given the curiosity that I bring to my role, I was able to really get a little bit deeper into what were the levers that I could leverage on how does capacity work in the container shipping space, for example, and how could I use that to drive a lot of commercial benefit. And in doing so, I learned very early on about the commercial acumen behind some of the business decisions that are taken. So when I then transitioned into a sales role and even the product role later on in my career, I was able to carry on that learning with me. I think that was a pivotal moment for me to be given those kind of responsibilities very early in my career and really leverage on my personal curiosity to get a bit deeper to understand the drivers. I think the second one would be my MBA with INSEAD. It was an interesting opportunity because I had a chance to step outside of a particular domain out of shipping and really look at what kind of problem statements were being worked on by my classmates globally. And of course, with INSEAD, you have a whole diverse set of classmates from different countries and different industries. And they bring with them a lot of breadth of knowledge. So I took that opportunity with my hands fully embedding myself into that INSEAD ecosystem and learned a lot, right? Such that when I graduated from INSEAD, I was in awe with the perspectives that said with someone sitting from an investment banking perspective, someone sitting from a consulting perspective, someone sitting from a FMCG perspective. And this became really useful when I then moved into my various roles throughout my career. So it allowed me to really bring a lot of strategic thinking via the INSEAD MBA, but really drive home the implementation in what we do on a daily basis via my commercial acumen, which I had built earlier in my career.
Fascinating, and sounds like a very fortunate, but not fortunate, but obviously you created that opportunity from an early stage in your career to sort of lean more towards the commercial side of business, which is excellent. And I guess now, fast forward to your current role, what is a day-to-day look like for you as a chief commercial officer, would you say?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, there is no typical day in a chief commercial officer role. Every day is so varied, especially in RightShip. But I could give you snippets about what I typically work on. So as chief commercial officer, I lead the global sales and marketing organization, as well as the pricing and commercial analysis part of the business. And on a day-to-day basis, basically, I work very closely with the sales team in understanding where the customer interest for RightShip is, where our opportunities to grow really present themselves, and how we can then go about activating some of our tactics in certain markets. One might appreciate that the proposition for safety would be very different from one charterer compared to another charterer, depending on the cargo that they wish to be carried, depending on the pain points that they have, depending on the mechanism. And we talked about APIs as an instance earlier, depending on the mechanism that they want to get their insights via. So for me, on a daily basis, that takes up a fair chunk of time in how we strategize and position ourselves with our customer base. I do spend a significant amount of time with my marketing team as well. And here it's more around the communication strategies and how we position our propositions out there. Do we leverage only on LinkedIn, or do we look at other channels out there? And what are the insights from a customer lead generation or an interaction perspective telling us? Are there certain articles or certain white papers that generate a lot more interest. For example, we have recently shared a white paper around the pilot ladder safety issues, and there's a lot of market feedback around that already. And that to me is quite interesting. It tells me that, okay, there's an opportunity for us to drive safety in that particular domain as well, right? Not just looking at the larger players, but also the pilots and the ladders and the interactions with the port as a ship comes to the port. And that's the other part of my role that I spent quite a significant amount of time in. I do also work very closely with my pricing and commercial analysis colleagues, and we look at the overall global outcomes in terms of where we see growth opportunities presenting themselves. For instance, do we see more opportunities in an emerging market, and how do we then work with the sales team to grow there? So these are some of the questions that we ask ourselves. And certainly this doesn't just relate to my work in isolation with the commercial team. I also work very closely with my colleagues in the product and technology team, who are constantly listening to the market, constantly understanding and iterating what kind of solutions do resonate. So that product market fit testing is something that I get pretty immensely involved in, and that's also an opportunity for us to make sure that we are building products and solutions that are most relevant to what the market requires. And if there's an emerging pain point, if there's an emerging insight that we can provide, and we think about the world and how it's changing today with this whole discussion around IMO regulations, right, around emissions. That's something that we need to be very keenly putting our ear to the ground and really understanding what's the pulse of the market and making sure that our propositions are fast relevantly built. So yeah, I mean, it's quite a diverse area of activity that I have on a daily basis, but that's the nature of the job. But one way.
Understood, and thank you for sharing that. And I guess let's say, for example, if I was working for a maritime software company and I was the head of sales, and I have aspirations to become a chief commercial officer one day, what do you think the difference is in the roles between the two? And perhaps from what you've seen in your career, what kind of tips or maybe guidance you can give to try and sort of for people to take that leap and that progression? Anything you can perhaps share on that that side?
Yeah, I think firstly, the commercial acumen is a non-negotiable. I think that's a given, right? To be heading a commercial function, I think the commercial acumen is definitely a necessity. And it's one of those skills that one develops, especially in a sales role, where you spend time in market, where you understand exactly what the customer is looking for and where value is really created. So if someone was in a head of sales role and looking to move into a chief commercial function, for example, I think there's a few things. So firstly, continue to focus on building that commercial acumen, continue to really have a pulse on what the market is saying, where the customer really understands the value, where the customer really resonates with value being created. I think that's a key piece. I think the other one that goes beyond that is really making sure that as someone in the head of sales and typically the conversations become a bit of a deal by deal basis, right? It becomes relatively transaction focused, which is understandable being in a sales role. I think it's keen to also note that in a commercial role, it needs to go beyond a transaction deal by deal perspective, and it needs to really move into an annual, a 3-year, a 5-year type of business growth trajectory. So the thinking has to evolve from a transaction deal by deal perspective into a strategic long-term perspective. And to me at least, I've really obtained a lot of those insights by looking at what are the insights that I can derive from my colleagues in the strategy team, in the finance team, and how does it then relate to what the market is telling us? So it's always a bit of a balancing act, right? If you think about it from a chief commercial perspective, there's one with the company's aspirations to grow. It's two is also understanding where the transaction nature of that deal by deal business flow continues to fuel the business growth itself, and really being able to strike a very good balance. I think that's the key part about the chief commercial. I think maybe the last bit about the role itself. I think one needs to be genuinely curious about what's happening in and outside the business. So spending time with the customers and and understanding their pain points is something that a lot of sales colleagues do get involved in, and that outside in perspective is much appreciated. But then also spending enough time with the products that we do sell, understanding how they're evolving and how they are then matching to evolutions in the market itself. So really having a good pulse of what's happening in the market, what's happening within the organization, and being able to stitch that to beyond a 6-month or 3-month horizon, and really looking at it from a year, 3-year growth perspective are key elements that come to the fore in such a role.
That makes perfect sense. And do you think you're having an MBA, having a kind of advanced degree in some way is a great platform to help you get into a C-suite position, or do you think it's not necessarily relevant or always needed, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a slightly contextual question, Callum, so it really depends. For me personally, I came from an environment where I've largely been exposed to one part of the macro environment, which was the liner shipping business at that point of time. And an MBA with all its exposure and global diverse academia, student body, professors, and so forth, brought a lot of wider thinking and be able to apply some strategic tools and frameworks in a more senior job. Is it helpful? Very much so. For me personally, at least. Is it necessary? I think that's something that one has to ask themselves, because if you think about it from a learning and exposure perspective, a lot of what I got from the INSEAD MBA was not so much the hard academia content, but it's really through those conversations that I have with that diverse network of classmates that really brought my learning at a very accelerated and a very wide level. And I think that's the question that one needs to ask themselves, is if they're considering an MBA, is why would I want to do an MBA? Exactly, what's the reason? And being able to distill that for themselves is key. And at which stage of their career do they see themselves doing an MBA, and which is beneficial for their growth? And it simply cannot be one answer that fits all. I know of some friends who are a little more senior in their careers, and then they go into their executive education programs, for example, which is super encouraged. I think learning is a lifelong endeavor. So be it an MBA, be it a executive course, be it a diploma on the side, a future leaders program, and so forth. I think that should continue regardless of where people are.
I've often wondered about it, and I think my appreciation is that you can come out of it and hopefully talk in a slightly different language and understand and communicate to people in a different way, on a more higher level about certain issues. It is how I sort of perceive one of the benefits, I think. And if you're presenting ideas to people, you can take it from all different angles and showcase the commercial side and other impacts. So I think it's very excellent. And whenever we speak to people in high level positions, the majority, I'd say, have had some type of form of higher education. So I think it's excellent. Good. Okay, great. Well, I think from a more personal side, we always ask everybody this, and you're no pressure to share anything too personal. But basically, essentially, we'd love to know if there's one or two things perhaps that most people won't know about you, certainly in maybe the working world. So is there anything in particular you could share with us to get a bit more insight into Gupreet?
Yeah, no, happy to do that. So maybe two personal things about me. So one is that I have a bubbly little, almost 2-year-old daughter, and she keeps us very busy. She's now learning how to say a few words. And it's always incredible to see a child going through that journey. That's the most rewarding part of our parenthood, although it keeps us very busy.
Yes.
And literally on our doors on most days of the week. I come home from work every day, and sometimes I'm thinking, okay, now I'll start my night shift.
Yep, that's very true.
Be running after the little one, and I think that's really a joy for me personally.
So we have 2 children as well, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and
oh wow,
and 3 dogs. So it's a very busy household for us as well. So it never stops.
Keeping you busy, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm amazed they're being quiet. They finished for school now for the summer, so I'm amazed they're being quiet, which is great. But no, it's very busy. Okay, excellent.
We count our blessings, don't we?
Yeah, we make the most of it while we can. Good. And anything else you'd like to share?
Oh, I mean, just a last a tidbit. I mean, one of the things that I've often reflected on was how I got even attracted into the world of shipping, right? And sometimes it's seen as a bit of a technical environment, and where does one see himself as fit? And to me, if I could just anecdotally share, I remember when I was having the interviews with Musk, I kept Googling my way, as one always does when preparing for an interview and talking to people about what the industry itself. And what really appealed to me was the global nature of it, the ability to solve a lot of complex problems. And I think that together with my personal curiosity really imbued the drive to continue to look for opportunities within the shipping industry, be it in a commercial sense, be it in a operational sense, be it in a digital sense or leadership role. So yeah, I think that's a useful tidbit that I would like to share here as well to everyone listening.
Thanks.
That I think the industry is a really interesting one, and as you have rightly said, Callum, the last 5-10 years has been extremely transformative. The use of data, the use of digital insights have just elevated the industry, and I think everyone can see the potential at which the industry itself can step up in so many ways from an ESG perspective, as we've covered earlier. So yeah, I mean, do consider this vibrant industry. There's a variety of roles that we do need diversity and smart people in this global world.
Yeah, exactly, and hopefully that's where we can help with our on the recruitment side. But no, I'm really excited about the direction that the industry is going, especially on the port side now as well, as you touched upon, like digital port operations, use of drones, all this different sort of fascinating techs to help with things like digital bills of lading, all that sort of stuff. It's became really exciting. So we're keen to kind of follow everything closely and meet new people. So I think it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you, and I'm really glad to hear more about your journey and also how RightShip sort of helps their customers. And anything else you'd like to cover, or you're all okay?
Yeah, I think we've covered a breadth of topics in this discussion so far. I mean, thanks very much for the platform and the opportunity to share with our listeners a little bit more about my personal journey in various roles in this industry, and a little bit outside the industry as well. Yeah. As well as the opportunity to share a little bit more about what we do in RightShip.
No, it's a pleasure to have you on. And well, I look forward to catching up again soon, and wish you all the best. And thank you again for joining us. Thank you for listening to this episode of Maritime SoftwareHub. I really enjoyed my discussion with Gurpreet. He's got a fascinating background. First of all, obviously starting in the army, working at companies like Maersk and Shell in different type of digital roles and also commercial roles. So it sounds like from a very early age in his career that he started to really look after things like P&Ls and kind of got that business acumen kind of built into him, which ultimately shaped his journey into becoming Chief Commercial Officer, as we discussed. So one last thing I didn't mention on the podcast is how to reach Gurpreet. If you would like to reach out to him and have a chat with him, the best way is on LinkedIn. So feel free to drop him a note, and I'm sure he'll get back to you if you have any questions. But in the meantime, thanks again for tuning in, and we look forward to talking again soon. Thank you.